and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Judge Rangel. You are now listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel.
I've been out in the community. All right. Welcome to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. I'm your host. Today in the studio, we have a very special guest. Before I introduce him to you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience in the last couple of months. I've been out and about doing the things that I'm supposed to do as an elected public official, and I come across folks here and there. And I've been hearing lately, Ron, we're waiting for your next episode. When can we expect a next episode on Beyond the Gavel? And I tell them, there's a lot of things that have been happening in my life, personal as well as in my professional life. When it comes to my professional life, folks do know that I go to a lot of community events and I meet with people. Interestingly, I came across two different groups very recently. Both of them wanted to talk to me about the exact same issue. One group I came across during a weekend political event about 2 weeks ago, and another group happened almost the next day at a lunch meeting. And basically, it went like this, and it's very interesting to me how this came about. So there was a lady that saw me, and she wanted to talk to me about a Mr. Blank, and I can't say his name, obviously, but frankly, I don't know the name that she gave me. It was Judge, I want to talk to you about blank. And I said, I don't know exactly who that is. She looked really surprised because I wasn't familiar with the name. Apparently, it was a name of a defendant who was in the court or has been or is in the court. And in her mind, she would have thought that I was very familiar with this particular person's name. And so one of the things that I thought about, there's a lot of misperceptions that people have regarding the dockets. There's this thought process that judges know every single thing about every single case that's pending before them. The reality of it is, judges are really unethically able to know anything about a pending case until that is brought to them by both parties in open court, right? So the idea is, like juries, we want our judges to be unbiased. We don't want them to have any preformed opinions about what the potential facts are in any case. We want them to come into the case or into a courtroom looking at these cases with an open mind. And whatever the attorneys think is important for them to argue and to tell the judges, that's what they should be considering, not some sort of outside information, outside meaning beyond the courtroom. Everything that the judge can consider regarding what the potential facts are in a case should only come from within the four walls of that courtroom. Now, currently, we have about 700 pending indicted cases in the 379th District Court. And for those of you that don't know, the 379th is a courtroom that I've been elected to serve. I'm in my 18th year currently. So this is a little higher than what we've had in the past, but there's reasons for that. There's an ebb and flow. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, depending on the caseloads and whether or not we're in a big trial or, other things that are taking up the court's time. Now, indicted cases theoretically are trial ready. That means they've gone through the grand jury process. Both sides have a right to have a jury trial in every single one of these cases. And when you ask, how long does it take for the court to have a jury trial in each one of these cases? On average, it takes about a week to try one of those cases. Now, on top of that, in the 379th, we have about 2,000 individuals who are out on probation. And so every day, I'm getting a handful of motions that the prosecutors file related to motions to revoke. That means people that are on probation are accused of violating some sort of a condition, one or more of their supervision. And then so there's an individual hearing that's supposed to take place to see whether or not that violation actually occurred. Defendants have a right to defend themselves. There's due process that has to take place, even in motions to revoke. And if the court finds, after hearing evidence in the courtroom, that there was some sort of violation of supervision, what's the appropriate result, right? What should happen as a result of that? Now, on top of all that, there's a lot of other motions for various other matters that are consistently set on the docket. A lot of them require hearing. So, going back to my story, I had just finished two separate jury trials about this time period when I came across these two groups. Now, these two jury trials took a solid 4 weeks for us to get through. In other words, back-to-back jury trials, 4 weeks, we resolved two cases. One of the jury trials was related to a charge that is referred to as a super aggravated sexual assault of a child. The other jury trial was a murder case. 4 weeks to try 2 cases from start to finish. Now, within that time period, we picked up about 140 newly indicted cases in the 379th. That's another 140 trial-ready cases. So think about that, right? The math doesn't necessarily add up. How is it that I could have 2 jury trials and dispose of 2 cases via that jury trial, and while we're doing that, we're picking up 140 new cases, and we're still keeping up? We're still have a docket to maintain without that backlog growing so much more than what it really should. Now, there's an explanation for this. A few years ago, the Office of Court Administration, which is in Austin, they operate under the Texas Supreme Court, they did a caseload study for all the counties in the state. They determined that in Bexar County, we were shy some courts. Our workload was much too high for the district courts. We got 27 district courts in Bexar County. 10 of those are criminal district courts. Now, they determined that we were shy about 12, 13, somewhere in there, 12 or 13 additional district courts that were required to be in the courthouse for us to maintain our caseloads. 3 of those being criminal courts. So we needed 3 new criminal district courts to keep up. Now, in our negotiations with the Commissioner's Court, the Commissioner's Court wanted to give us those 3 extra criminal district courts, but we have no courtroom space. They were cognizant of the fact that even if they would have said, we're going to spend an additional $1 million a year to give y'all another district court to help you dispose of these cases, to help you move these dockets along, there are no places to put these courts. However, we weren't able to get one associate judge on the criminal district court side. So that brings our total number of associate judges up to 3. Now, associate judges are appointed by the district courts. They can do everything that a district court can do, except they cannot oversee jury trials. So when there's a conflict, when a district court is in the middle of trying cases, like what I'm describing, I just completed and went through, the associate judges have an opportunity to fill in the gaps. And again, there's 3 for the 10 of us that are trying cases and are working hard. So the caseload is still very dramatic. Now, in this particular period that I'm going through, in this 4-week period of solid jury trials, we ended up having to conduct a second jury selection on one of these cases, which really put us in a time crunch. We were going to lose some jurors if we did not finish the trial on time. So we're going through this process. There's some attorneys that are late. We got a jury panel that's out in the hall for an hour. This is a very common thing. Judges get stressed out when jury panels are waiting in the hall because we're trying to move these dockets and we want people to be satisfied with their trial experience. So at some point, our court coordinator, Trish, who does a great job in the 379th of taking care of our caseloads, basically says, look, these attorneys are late. When they show up, I'm going to send them to an associate judge so we can bring in this jury panel. Great. So we do those things. Now, when judges have to move a case because they're in the middle of a jury trial where they got a jury panel waiting and attorneys are late, and attorneys aren't late necessarily because they're lazy or because they don't want to show up to court. In today's world, attorneys have to take a lot of cases in order to fulfill their duties as lawyers, right? Especially when it comes to indigent defense, which is great that we have our guests here because we're going to talk about indigent defense and some of the things that lawyers can do to make society a better place for all of us. So related to these particular attorneys that are running around, they basically have to go to 5, 6, 7, 8 courts a day, sometimes in different jurisdictions, different counties are running around trying to catch up on things. And obviously, when you got a panel in the hall of 80 people that are waiting to know whether or not they're going to be on this jury trial for this jury selection process, the coordinator, Trish, says, we're going to send them over to an associate judge so we can bring in this trial. So when you do that, judges ethically cannot talk to other judges about what's going on in cases. So I cannot ever speak to another district judge or another county court at law judge or a JP or a municipal court judge about a pending case and say, hey, let me tell you a little bit of information about this case. Can't do that. Unethically, that is forbidden. And so it's just a little commentary. I had that conversation with both groups. Both groups were like, wow, we didn't know that. We were looking at some Facebook page somewhere and it mentioned something. And so, you know, when people don't have information, they fill in the gaps and it's rarely filled in with positive thoughts. There's always some conspiracy out there that's going on. Thank you so much for explaining this. Thank you so much for talking to us about this. Ron, why don't y'all educate people about this kind of stuff? And both groups, I said, you know what? That's why I have a podcast. I have a podcast to educate folks about how the system operates. This is why we're talking about it now, because I told both of those groups that we would have this conversation here. And, you know, every single week, judges, criminal district court judges, we have in our dockets murder cases, capital murders where people could get sentenced to death, sexual assaults of children, aggravated super sexual assaults, kidnappings, aggravated assaults generally where somebody shoots somebody, stabs somebody. We got human trafficking cases, and we have animal cruelty cases, and a lot more cases than that, a lot of drug cases. There is not one single case that ever stands out above any other case. There is no case that I would ever look at and think, oh, that's kind of a political case. I kind of don't want to deal with that. I deal with political cases every single day. Apart from that, I get involved in political issues every single day as part of my job. So just a little bit of information, something for people to understand and to know about the system. If there's any questions, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to Beyond the Gavel and let me know what your questions are. Let me introduce our guest today. Our guest is somebody who I've known for a while. He has become our go-to in this court when there is a witness that is testifying, and that witness may say something that may incriminate themselves somehow or another if they say either the truth or maybe they don't want to say the truth and there's some allegation that they're not going to say the truth. What do we do? What do we do with a witness that is not charged with a crime, but if they talk about what they've seen or what they saw, whatever interaction they had with whatever crime it is that allegedly occurred, and they somehow open themselves up for a potential prosecution, you got to appoint a lawyer to them. And not a lot of lawyers are good at everything. In fact, I had that conversation earlier today. Very few lawyers are good at everything. And so that's why we have so many different types of lawyers that exist in the law, to make sure that lawyers can specialize, not necessarily to become board certified, although a lot of them are, and I'm sure they're all very great attorneys. But lawyers also, whether or not they're board certified, also say, I'm going to focus my career on doing A or my career on doing B. And you can kind of tell a lot about a person by the kind of choices they make. So the kind of representation, the kind of people that they want to protect as it relates to the representation and those types of things. So